Well, hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about Alistair Reynolds' book, Revelation Space. This is a hard science fiction book written by a man who is actually an astronomer with a PhD in astronomy, so he is a scientist. So this would fall on what they call the hard end of science fiction. Not rock hard, because there's definitely some woohoo concepts in there, but definitely on the hard end. Universe with no faster than light travel and that kind of thing. And this is one of those novels that explores the whole concept of the dark forest. With as many stars as are out there, and we've discovered a lot of planets around them, why haven't we heard from any aliens? And so, according to the dark forest concept, the reason is we're all afraid of each other. We're all in hiding. And Shichin Liu, in his The Three Body Problem, explored that with the whole idea that they'll kill each other off. Alistair Reynolds comes up with a different idea. So let's talk about it. And I'm going to explore using a concept map to describe the book instead of just reading my scripts. We'll see how that goes. So let's try out the concept map thing. So let's talk about Revelation Space. The author of the book is Alistair Reynolds. And the copyright is the year 2000. He is Welsh in origin, so he's from the, Wales. Has a PhD in astronomy, so he kind of knows what he's talking about as far as the space goes. And he works for the European Space Agency. I will also note that this book is part of the Inhibitor trilogy. Two other works in the trilogy, the other two works in the trilogy are Redemption Arc and Absolution Gap. I have read both of them. I will just say that the quality declines through the trilogy. I may review them, but I may not work this hard to review them. Now, I said he's a PhD in astronomy, so let's talk a little bit about the universe that he wrote into his book. It's going to be what I would call hard-ish science fiction. And that ties to his PhD in astronomy and working for the European Space Agency. What that means is he has a big universe, which, if you have a PhD in astronomy, you realize that, it's big. It's not like Star Wars where you can just snork over to the next door planet like I'd jump in my Camry and hop over to the next town. In this universe, there is no faster than light travel. So it takes a long time to travel from star to star, decades or more. So the solution to that is maybe we freeze the passengers while we're traveling. They call it reefer sleep. Or the other benefit is if you're going fast enough, you can use time dilation. Now, that's an Einsteinian thing, but basically the closer you get to the speed of light, the slower time goes for you relative to the universe outside. So maybe 4 years pass for you while 30 years pass outside. I put the ish on the hard-ish science fiction because one of the other things that pops up in this book is human augmentation. So he talks about transhumans. This includes things like brain implants, which several characters have, cybernetic augmentation, which maybe, hey, let's replace the arm with a robot arm. They can regrow body parts. There is cloning in this future, and there is genetic engineering. Another thing which plays into the plot, which all of these things play into the plot in one way or another, is that you can actually store a personality of a person on a computer as an AI. So what about aliens? Some science fiction just avoids aliens, some goes nuts with it, but they're really just humans with bumps on their foreheads. So I will just tell you that there are aliens. But this is what they call a dark forest universe. And I provided a link to down below to Kurzgesagt's video that explains the dark forest universe. So what they're finding is mostly the aliens are extinct in this universe. So they'll find some artifacts left over from these aliens. And then there's a couple of, let's call them, things that are truly alien. There's an ocean of microorganisms that can absorb personalities and different things. I don't want to give you too much detail. So the story itself really follows 3 plot threads. So the first one I want to talk about takes place on the planet Resurgam. On the planet Resurgam, the main character is a gentleman named Dan Sylvestre. He's an archaeologist, and he's there. Would you call them archaeologists if they're studying aliens? I don't know. But anyway, he's there studying the amarantin, which is a bird-like species that was made extinct about 900,000 years ago. So you remember, the aliens are mostly extinct. Here's an example, and he's studying them. In the course of his studies, he does discover that they had discovered space travel. Now, Dan Sylvestre also is in possession of his father's AI personality. And events of this Resurgam thread include a civil war where Dan Sylvestre is overthrown as leader of the colony, and they're stuck there. The ship that brought them there left and never came back. And how do you communicate that, hey, colony here, help, lifeless world, we need your help? You don't. You're stuck, so you got to make it work. So they're stuck on Resurgam, no matter who's in charge. So there's that thread. Another thread takes place on a light hugger, which is a spaceship that can travel close to the speed of light. So, a light hugger named Nostalgia for Infinity. The main character in Nostalgia for Infinity thread is Ilya Volyova. She is what they call a triumvir, so she's one of the 3 leaders of the ship. And I'll just be honest, I put no bubbles for most of the other characters on the ship, because they never impressed me as individual personalities. I couldn't tell them apart. But anyway, Nostalgia for Infinity is, as a light hugger, is actually home of one of the Ultras. So the Ultras are a group of humans that live on these light hugger spaceships. The Ultras use augmentations, a lot of robotic arms, cybernetic implants, maybe a lot of body parts replaced, and they do travel. I wrote FTL, but they don't actually travel faster than light. They travel close to the speed of light, so they can take advantage of time dilation. So they're like a people out of time. They can have seen hundreds of years of history just because 20 years passed on their spaceship and hundreds passed outside while they were traveling. Another character on this spaceship, this light hugger that shows up, is Captain John Brannigan. And yes, I did misspell his name. Captain John Brannigan is actually in reefer sleep, so he is frozen. Every so often, Ilya Volyova goes down to wake him up. Not much, just slightly above freezing, just so she can talk to him. But what he suffers from is the melding plague, which is a plague that basically it was nanobots that attacked human and basically attacked technology. The author is a little vague about what exactly it attacks, but yeah, it attacked Captain John Brannigan pretty hard because he was very cybernetic. A lot of robot parts. Their goal is to find Dan Sylvestre, because Dan Sylvestre has the AI of his father, and his father was able to cure John Brannigan of this melding plague before. And that brings me to our third part of the story. So there's 3 threads of the story. The third one follows Anna Curry. Now, Anna Curry lives on the planet Yellowstone. Yellowstone, of course, got hit very hard by the melding plague. At one time, it was a very wealthy, very high-tech world, and it is no longer. It had a glittering ring of space stations and other orbital thingies that were hit so hard by the melding plague that they're kind of wrecked, destroyed the local economy, and so it became what they now call the Rust Belt. Dan Sylvest is actually from Yellowstone. I was unclear, but I got the impression that he left Yellowstone before the melding plague, but I might be wrong about that. And then Yellowstone also has a city that has a huge ghetto, but it's called Chasm City. Now, Anna Curry actually works as an assassin, and there's a whole backstory to how she fell into that and what it actually means. But she gets hired by a wealthy local gangster named the Mademoiselle. And the Mademoiselle hires her to kill Dan Sylvest, who is on the planet Resurgam. What? So how do we get her to Resurgam? Well, the Nostalgia for Infinity needs a new gunnery officer, because the last one went insane, and they're headed to the planet Resurgam to locate Dan Sylvest. So, that's fun. I'm going to avoid major spoilers. I'll just say that the real fun in the story starts when all the threads of the story meet up at the planet Resurgam. The mystery of the Amarantan is solved, and we finally learn why there are only the remains of intelligent life in the universe. As I said at the beginning, he does have the author has a PhD in astronomy. So in a lot of books, travel to another planet is like me hopping in the Camry and driving over to the next town. In his universe, that is not the case. His universe is big. It takes years, decades to go between planets. And he's kind of pushing the science there, too. Because of time dilation, when you're traveling at those kind of speeds, it doesn't take decades aboard the ships. But yeah, it's a big universe. The book also blurs the line between human and artificial. Many people have implants or even replacement body parts. Artificial intelligences can take on the identity of real humans. Dan Sylvest talks to the personality of his father that's stored on a computer. So even after the humans are dead, it can do that. And Alistair Reynolds isn't afraid to use... What did I mean by that? Oh, now I know what I meant. And Alistair Reynolds wasn't afraid to take us 21st century readers and just drop us in the future 500 years from now and say, figure it out. And you do, mostly. You just have to pay attention and say, oh, okay, now I get what's going on there. It is part of a trilogy called the Inhibitor Trilogy. And the name of that trilogy is, by the way, a spoiler. So if I review the sequel, Redemption Arc, so you'll have to expect some spoilers on this one. I would say that the book is worth reading. Does require some attention. You can't just read it casually. It has big ideas, some realistic science, and it looks at how humans might change with technology. For now, most of our technology is like, oh, I'm wearing glasses to aid my vision. In the future, maybe you will have an implant in your eyeballs to help you get information, that you can see projected right on your retina. You may have artificial limbs, which some of us do. The line between human and machine will blur more and more, and he takes that quite a bit further. And that's going to change how humans interact with each other and with, what society looks like. I will be honest, I found a lot of the characters very hard to relate to, but there's enough sympathetic viewpoint characters that do pull you in. So it is an interesting read. Like some of Dan Simmons' work, like the Hyperion Cantos, but definitely nowhere near as literary. I have an ebook copy, because of course it wasn't in my local library. I don't feel any need at all to own a paper copy, if that tells you anything. I may reread it someday. I'm glad I read it once. But it's not great literature with lots of great themes that is worth rereading, in my opinion. But it's not junk food either. It's very high concept, and I don't know, like I said, it's hard science fiction, so I always encourage that. So anyway, I want to thank you for watching. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.